Hi, sorry. My name is Flora, and I'm a third year at the George Washington University, and I study geography and political science. And I've been with the Validation Hub since the summer, and I'm one of your co-hosts today with NASA hosting the training.
Excellent segue. NASA.
I'm Naza. I am a junior at the George Washington University studying environmental science. And yeah, I'll be hosting the training with Flora today.
Excellent. SB.
Hi, everyone. My name is SB. I'm a second year graduate student in the geography department at George Washington University. And I've been with the hub since about March.
Excellent. And last but not least, Kayla.
Hi guys, I'm Kayla. I'm a senior at GW. I do environmental studies and geography and GIS as well. And I've also been with the hub since about March.
Excellent. Thank you. So that's the team we'll be working with today. And I see some folks are saying hello in the chat. That is awesome. I'd love everybody to take a second to say hello in the chat and maybe let us know where you're calling from today. That'd be fantastic. The training today will involve two parts. So the first part will be a presentation, and that will be talking about validation in general and the entire workflow. This will be followed up with a live demo in JOSM, identifying the workflow and working through some actual projects and how so you can sort of see how the validation process happens sort of live. That's why I was mentioning earlier how some JOSM experience is necessary, because we're going to be using tools that if you're familiar with JOSM, they'll be familiar to you. If you're not familiar with JOSM, that's fine. Let's get an overview of how sort of the process works. And the process we're using is the one that's sort of been established by the OSM community. So hot and missing maps and whatnot, we all use the same sort of process to validate features and to validate work that's going into OSM. So with that said, if you have questions during the process, during the presentation, please put them in the chat. Both Flora and NASA will stop periodically to see if they're to capture any other questions that maybe are in the chat, or maybe something comes to you. Then you can take yourself off mute. During the presentation, we ask that you please keep yourself on mute. So it's not to interrupt the presentation. Everybody can clearly understand and hear what's going on. When the presentation is done, we will be open the floor for any kind of questions, and we can demonstrate other things that maybe weren't clear initially. As well, the presentation slides that you'll see today and this recording will all be made available in the next week or so after the presentation is concluded. Okay, so if for some reason you get kicked out, please just join again. If you lose a connection, please join again, and we'll sort of readmit you as fast as we can. But as I mentioned, both the presentation slides and this recording will be made available to everybody who register for this particular training. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Flora and NASA. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Richard. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. If I can get that to work. Can you see is my screen visible? Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So as Richard said, this is the third and final session of this YouthMappers training session. And today the topic is how to validate with JOSM. So the first question revolves around what validation is. And when you validate data, the main aspect of it is that you review the work that's been done by other mappers, and you want to review for accuracy and for completeness. It's usually done by experienced mappers. Ideally, you would do it using JOSM, because there's a bunch of plugins and tools that we'll get to later, but that make the process easier. The validation process is quite easy. It's, like I said, you download the data onto your JOSM server, you validate it, you check that it's accurate and that it's complete, and then you send it back onto the server and you provide constructive feedback, and you make sure to encourage mappers to come back to OSM because we want to encourage this positive community. So why is it important to validate the data? Really, the main aspect is that we want to get as many sets of eyes on data as possible to ensure that it's accurate. The data that's mapped, it can't be used without the confidence, with confidence until it's validated. And we see, if you look at the little graph that we have on the bottom left here, there is a constantly increasing number of projects and mappers that use the task manager. And that just means that we also need to increase the number of validators that validate this data. So that's why trainings like this are really important, so we can teach people how to validate, and that will ensure that the data is increasing and that it's becoming more accurate. So now we'll go through the workflow of validation. So how to actually check the work of other mappers, kind of a step-by-step guide of how it works. This is a bit of an overview of what it looks like. The first step is that you want to read the instructions for the task. This is just so that going forward, while you're validating, you know what to check for and how to ensure accuracy. Once you've downloaded the data, you want to make sure that the imagery is aligned correctly. Then you will use the JOSM validation tool, which Naza will demo later on. And then it's important to, even after the validation tool, it's important to do a little visual scan of the area that's mapped to make sure that there's no areas that are missing or that are completely overlooked. Then there's a variety of helpful plugins that you can run, which we'll talk about later. Then you upload your edits back onto the server, and then you will update the task status and thank the mappers for having mapped, and encourage them to come again, like I mentioned earlier. So the first step, this is probably one of the most important steps when you're doing the validation process, because when you're reviewing the instructions of the project, you want to look what imagery they want you to use. They will tell you which objects should be mapped. So whether it's roads, whether it's buildings, what type of tags you should use. And connected to that, there's often a bunch of helpful wikis that will be linked to the instructions that will tell you about how to tag certain roads or certain buildings, especially like specifically related to that project. So that's the first step, and it's, like I said, one of the most important ones because it sets you up for a successful validation process later on. The next step is to align the correct imagery. So you choose the imagery. You choose the imagery of the project based on the project instructions that you'll have seen earlier on. And once you've added that imagery, you want to make sure that it lines up correctly, that it aligns with what's already on the map. And if it doesn't, you can either adjust imagery offset, like you see on this image here, or you can switch out the imagery to a different source before proceeding. But you have to make sure that it's aligned with what's on the map. Step 3 is probably my favorite tool. It's the validation tool in JOSM. You can see it in the vertical toolbar, and it's shown using a blue check mark like this here. What this does, when the validation tool is run, it basically checks for errors, for warnings, or for something called other, depending on how severe the issue is. The difference between errors and warnings is that you can upload data with a warning, but you can't upload data with an error, because an error is something that should always be fixed before you upload it back onto the server. But the way that you run the validation tool is that you select features that you want to validate, or you deselect everything, and then it will run the validation tool on the entire square that you're meant to validate. And then it will basically, if you look here on the right, once you've run the validation tool, it will give you a list of errors and of warnings or of other. Typically, these things are either you have overlapping ways or overlapping buildings, you'll have unnamed ways. So these are a bunch of different issues that can come, and the validation tool detects these issues. There are ways to fix them automatically. So you can click on the other, and then it will give you exactly the list. And then you can right click it and you can say zoom to problem, and that will give you a better view of the issue. Once you've selected it, you can either hit the bottom right here and click fix, but there are also many errors that need to be manually fixed, and that you actually need to go in yourself and move a node or unconnect different ways, or whatever it is that you need to do. I like to, even when I do the automatic fix, I like to go in myself and zoom in just to see before I hit any automatic fixes, just to make sure that it's actually doing the correct work. But you should always run this tool again after you make your own edits to the square, just to make sure before you upload it. It doesn't hurt to run the validation tool too many times, and you'll make sure to have accurate data that is uploaded. Step 4, so after you've run the validation tool and you've hopefully gotten rid of most of the errors, all of the errors and most of the warnings, you'll want to do a visual scan and just a quick assessment of the issues. So what's important is, are there any buildings that are missing? Are they placed properly? Are they tagged correctly? This, obviously, you won't always know the name of the building or the function, but it must at least be tagged with building equals yes. Are the buildings squared? If they're not, then you should use the Q shortcut. Are the nodes glued together? For that, you can use the G shortcut to unglue it. Or do you need to rotate a building? Then you can select it and then hold down Control-Shift, and you'll be able to rotate it. But these are just common issues that we encounter a lot when we're validating data, especially the ones with the squared buildings. That's something people tend to overlook. So that's something that we fix a lot. And then for roads, it's important to make sure that they're digitized properly. And sometimes it happens that it's actually easier to redo the entire road rather than correcting it node by node. But we don't like to delete features on JOSM, and so sometimes you'll just have to do the feature called replace geometry, and that makes sure to retain the history of the feature and to retain any tags that have been put on it. You'll want to check that roads are connected properly. If they have to be, are the roads overlapping buildings, or are they overlapping other roads when they shouldn't be? And again, you'll want to make sure that they're tagged properly, only from what you can tell. Obviously, if you don't have local knowledge, then you'll only be able to tag it as a highway or as a specific type of road. Right, but this is the 4th step. Now, it can happen that the task or the square is so badly mapped that you're wondering whether or not you should fix it yourself or whether you should send it back to the original mapper for them to finish it. And then they can send it out for validation themselves. And when that's the case, we usually use this flowchart to determine whether or not we want to map it ourselves or whether we want to send it back. So the first question you should ask yourself is the urgency of the task. If it is a high priority task, then you should just automatically fix it yourself through the validation process and then send the data back up. If it is a medium low priority, then you want to look at when the square was last edited. If it was more than a month ago, then again, you should just fix it yourself, because it's highly unlikely that this OSM user will come back and edit it or even see the comment. But if it was last edited less than 1 month ago, then you'll want to look at how active the user is. If there is very little activity, then again, it makes most sense to fix it yourself. But if this user has a lot of recent commitments, or there's recent work on multiple tasks, then you can send the task back to them. You say that it wasn't mapped properly, and we'll show you how to do that in a second, but you ask them to fix it themselves, because it would just be too much work for the validator to fix all these major problems with the square. Right, so again, here just a common, here's a list of common issues and errors that we encounter when we're validating. Like I said, buildings not being squared. You select that building and then you press Q to square the building. One of my favorite tools is that you go on the search bar and you type in exactly this, building in view nodes, :4-, and it basically finds any area or it finds all the buildings on the square. And it does this by looking at things that have nodes of 4 or more. And then once you have all the buildings selected, you can press Q. and it will square all the buildings in your in the area. It's important afterwards to zoom in and make sure that buildings then are not overlapping or completely disfigured. Sometimes that can happen when it's squaring the buildings. Sometimes we'll see buildings that are incorrectly tagged as area and not as a building. In that case, you just change the tag to building. Sometimes nodes from buildings will be attached to other buildings or to roads, and there's just a little bit of chaos. And in that case, you want to press G to unglue the nodes, and then you can separate the objects by moving them with your mouse. If roads are not connected to each other, then you'll press A and you'll click on the end of the road to continue drawing it. And then, or you can select 2 lines, press C, and that will combine them if the roads are meant to be combined. Unnamed ways, that's an error that we usually ignore just because in most cases we don't know the names of the road, and that's completely fine, but it should be tagged correctly as a highway, sorry. And sometimes it happens that there's duplicate features, and in that case we suggest using either the Mappathon plugin, which allows you to select duplicate buildings and to search for those, but I'll get to that in the next slides as well, about the helpful plugins. Right, and here just some more common issues and errors. Like I said, roads that are incorrectly named. To find all the named roads, you can click Control F or Command F for Mac, and then you type highway and then you will want to put a name, because sometimes people will mistakenly name roads road, like in quotation marks road, or add a description while really it should be tagged as a highway. If roads are joined to buildings, again, to disconnect them, you select them and you click G on your keyboard, which G works to unglue. And one of the most powerful tools, like I said earlier, is the JOSM search tool. You can do this either by going on Edit and then Search, or you press Control F or Command F on a Mac on your keyboard. Or you can also click the magnifying glass in the top of the JOSM window. But like I said earlier, if you want to search for buildings, this is one of my favorite features. You click building, you type in building in view nodes, colon, and then 4-, and that allows you to select all the buildings in the area. Now I just wanted to stop and check if there are any questions. But I see that there's been some questions in the group chat. In the chat. If you yeah, sorry, I'm just reading the questions now. But probably SB and Kayla can either respond to them with the squaring. To your question here, sometimes you can come across buildings where they're part square and part curved. In those cases, we do encourage people to mostly use squared, because even if things are a little bit slanted, most angles will be 90-degree angles in buildings. But there are times where you can combine a circle with a square. I don't know if that answers your question, but it seemed like part of it was square and part of it was curved. There are tools that you can use to make one of your features a circle and one of your features a rectangle. And in that case, and then you can combine them, and then that would allow you to make that shape. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but we have time planned in for questions at the end as well. Right. So now the question comes, what is complete mapping and what is spatial accuracy? You have to ensure that all the items that are mentioned in instructions, whether it's buildings and roads, or just roads, they all have to appear to be mapped. And the second part of it is that they have to be correctly tagged. So it's very important to add any items that are missing, or to fix any items that you see. And it's very important. I know earlier we talked about that sometimes it may be easier to delete features, but we try to encourage people not to delete features. because there are ways to go around that, such as the geometry tool that we talked about earlier, where you get to keep the history and the tags of that feature. So this is step 5, which is when you've finished validating the task. Before you want to upload your edits, like I said, run the validation tool again, just to make sure that you didn't miss anything. And then, just as when you edit with JOSM regularly, you'll want to upload the changes back onto the OSM server. You do that using this here, this upward arrow. This upward arrow, and once you've done that, this pop-up window will appear, and as with any time when you upload data back onto OSM, it will give you a list of the objects that you've modified, and then it's important to provide a brief comment about the changes that you're uploading. So this will include any hashtags or project specific tags that you want to use, and then also add in the imagery that you used. And then you can upload the changes back onto the server. Once you've uploaded it, it's important to return back to the tasking manager, because you'll want to update the task there. Now, it can happen that the task from active project has too many issues to be fixed. And in that case, you want to stop the validation process. So you'll still want to upload the edits that maybe you already started editing, or maybe you already started validating, and then you realized that there were too many tasks, too many things to do. And so you'll still want to upload any edits in JOSM back onto OSM. But when you return to the tasking manager, you want to update the task status to no, because they will ask, is this task well mapped? And you will say no. And this will basically send this task back to the original mapper, and open it up for them to fix the areas and fix the errors before it is up for validation again. What's important here is that you also leave comments to the mappers explaining what is there to do, and you want to tag the mappers to make sure that they receive some form of notification. Here's an example message that you can use. You say, great work so far. Please edit the top left area to map the missing buildings that are left there. Thanks for mapping. Keep up the good work. It's just important that we keep this encouraging and constructive community, so that people do come back to map and don't get discouraged. And you can find a list of all the users who've worked on a square in the history tab. But this is the alternative step 5, right? If you want to invalidate the task because it wasn't done well enough or thoroughly enough. Ideally, you could move on to step 6, which is everything has been done correctly. You've uploaded the corrected square back onto OSM, and then you want to thank mappers who worked on the square. And you'll say, is this task well mapped? And you'll put yes. Again, I want to reiterate that we want to keep these messages positive and constructive. And of course, mistakes can happen and mappers may make errors, but we want to help them learn for the next time, and we want to encourage them to come back. And even if there are no issues at all, messages are a nice way to thank people for their mapping. I know for myself, if I'm mapping something, sometimes I'll receive a message even 2 months later, and it's a nice little reminder of the work that you did. So it's always nice to add a message. Here's some example messages with also constructive criticism. Things like, remember to square the corner of all your buildings. This can be done using the Q key. Hope to see you again mapping soon. Or remember to check the instructions for the correct tags for buildings and roads. Great work. So like I said, it's important to keep this polite and encouraging and positive. Here's some more message examples. If you go on our website, youthmappers.org/validation-hub, there's a very helpful resource there that kind of gives you just messages that you can use for any situation. So did they not square their buildings? And you have a series of example messages here. Did they have issues with tagging different features? Then you have a series of examples here. Or sometimes they'll struggle with knowing when or when not to mark it as complete. So we have some message examples here as well. But like I said, they're all uploaded on the YouthMappers Validation Hub website. Now I'll go into talking about some of the useful plugins. Remember from our earlier trainings that you can download plugins. You go to, in your JOSM, you'll go to preferences, and then you go to plugins and then search, and then you get to type in any plugins that you want to download. You have to check the box next to the plugin, and then you'll select download list, and this will install the plugins onto your JOSM. The plugin icon in the preferences window looks like this puzzle piece here. Here just some useful plugins. The to-do plugin, it adds a to-do list dialog that it kind of makes it easy to go through a large list of objects. So this is a very helpful one. The Mapathoner, I think it's the one that we probably use the most. They're used a lot for hot tasking managers. I mean, for tasks, and by missing mappers as well. But they allow you to do things like select duplicate buildings, select non-orthogonal buildings, and then it also allowed you to do batch L-shaped, circle, and orthogonal buildings, which are incredibly helpful. Duplicate buildings, for example, that one will select all the buildings that overlap more than 50% with another building. And then non-orthogonal buildings, that tool, it basically selects all the buildings that are almost orthogonal, which is super helpful. And I put a helpful link here, how to use Mapathoner. It teaches you about when you can use each different tool that is part of the Mapathoner plugin. Mark Scene is another helpful plugin that we like to use, and it just, like the word tells you, it marks areas of the map that you've seen, and it marks them as seen. And this is especially important in the later part of the validation, when you have to make sure that you haven't missed any areas of the square, and you have to make sure that everything is mapped correctly. Right, now here is a list of helpful resources. The validation training document will take you to basically what we've just gone over here, but it maybe will be in a bit more detail. And if you're confused about any of the instructions that we just gave you, they're all on this document. Do check out the YouthMappers YouTube channel. It has all the videos that we've made. It has older trainings, and also trainings on JOSM in general or on advanced JOSM. But these are all like Richard mentioned at the start, this slideshow will be available to you. And so these are all really helpful resources to use as you kind of get started with your validation work. And this is the last one is very helpful as well. It's the keyboard shortcuts, JOSM. It makes your life so much easier to kind of just click on your keyboard instead of always looking for the option within the menu. And this is the Validation Hub team, which you've been introduced to at the start, but that's Richard's email as well, in case you have any questions. Right, so that was the presentation part. I hope that wasn't too much information, but I'm going to hand it over to Naza now, who will demonstrate what I've been explaining. Thank you. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Great, cool. Thank you so much, Flora. So as Flora said, I'm going to be doing the demo portion of the validation training. So I'm just going to share my screen and we can go through it together. All right, can you all see my screen? Yeah, all right, perfect. So the first project that I've chosen for this demo is one mapping buildings in southern Kubu in Indonesia. So the first thing that you're going to want to do as a reminder is you're going to want to look at the instructions and go through the instructions on your own. So first we're going to look at these general instructions. They're telling you to map all the buildings, and if you have any direct knowledge of the area, add that information. We don't, but we can definitely validate and see if any people have done those direct personal points of knowledge. And asks you for your imagery. So this one asks, it's a little bit of an older project, so it asks for Maxar imagery. Unfortunately, Maxar Premium isn't available anymore. So instead we use Bing or ESRI imagery, whichever one aligns better. And once we open the task, we'll see which one aligns better and use that one. Then it goes into saving, asking you to save when you have a couple edits, and any tagged buildings or roads. It gives you a link here to the OSM wiki, which many of the projects on Hot and Teach Tasking Manager will give you guidelines for how to tag things. It also gives you a little tutorial on how to make buildings if you don't know already. I'm assuming that you all know based on if you've done the intro to JOSM and advanced JOSM training. So these are just basic knowledge. And yeah, so now we can go ahead and pick a task. So we're gonna pick this one right here, a little bit of a smaller one. So I'm gonna select it, and you can see it says validate selected task here. Now you can validate more than one task at a time if you want to. Let's say I wanted to validate two next to each other. So now it says down here at the bottom right, validate two selected tasks. This can be helpful when you have like smaller squares of imagery and you want to validate a larger portion of your imagery at one time, especially if there's some overlapping features in each square. But for right now, we're just going to validate one square. So I'm going to click that one. It's highlighted in a black box, and I'm going to press validate selected task. So now you can see my screen has changed, and I'm going to go down to my JOSM. And you can see we have our square popped up here. Now what I'm going to do, I need to move my Zoom screen. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the imagery in. So I'm going to go up to the top bar where my mouse is pointed at imagery, click it, and then it gives me this drop-down list full of imagery. I'm going to choose Bing aerial imagery. As you can see, it aligns pretty well. Now, if you remember the first task that you should do is make sure that your imagery aligns and do any imagery offsets if you need. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit and just take a look around, visually scan. We have a little bit of imagery offset here and here. And it looks like maybe I could use a little bit of imagery offset over here. So I'm going to keep this in my field of view, press imagery up at the top, and down here it says new offset. And now I'm just going to click and drag to where I want it to be. And I'm just making sure that this road is right alongside, and you can see it moves with me. So I'm just going to do that and press OK. And then awesome. The rest of this looks all right. The rest of it looks pretty fine to me. And yeah, I just do that visual scan first. The next step that we're going to do is we're going to run the validation tool. So on the bottom, on the right side of my screen, you're going to see it says right here, validation results. There's this box, and there's this blue check mark with the word validation next to it. I'm going to click that, and that runs the validation tool. And it brings up any errors that we have. And you can see here we have 5 warnings and 6 other errors. So first I'm going to go through the warnings because those are the bigger errors, and we want to make sure that we get those all done. I'm going to click that drop down button, go to the first one, and it says node connects highway and building. So if I click that drop down button, right click on it, and I press zoom to problem, it's going to take me right here. One important thing to note about my imagery is that I have downloaded the Missing Maps validation plugin, something that I highly recommend. It's in our resource tab that we'll go back to on our presentation that's going to be sent to you guys. But for me as a visual learner, it really helps me see where some of those errors are. So some things that it does is like right here, you see that red triangle. So any buildings that are connected to roads or other features are shown in red triangles, and it gives you this message, road intersects building. Also right here, you can see it says overlapping buildings. So it gives me that visual cue of, okay, something is an error here, and I don't miss that. It helps me. You don't have to use it, but it's something that you should know that it isn't it is a plugin that I've installed. So now we're going to go ahead and fix this. You want to make sure that no buildings should be attached to a road. So I'm going to click that, and I'm going to press my G key. And as you can see now, these are two different nodes. I'm going to use the Q key to square that building. Use Command and Shift just to rotate it and align it to where that building is. And as you can see, I've aligned that building now. And I'm just going to align all of the ones next to it. Seems like it got a little off. Same thing over here. Just aligning those buildings. All right, and now since I've done that, I've fixed that error over there. I'm going to rerun my validation tool just to show you guys. And you can see that error has gone away. And now there's another error, overlapping buildings. So I can click it, press zoom to problem, and we know it's right here. So we can just left click and drag and move these buildings to where they need to be. And I'm just going to fix up these buildings over here, making sure that they are all mapped in the correct way. And as you can see over here, I've run the validation tool again to get rid of this blue box or yellow box. All these buildings have been mapped, but we have an extra building over here. I'm going to leave that for now, but I want you guys to keep that in mind, just because you know, there was no building, but there was this extra building created. We want to make sure that we don't delete it, because we don't want to delete other users' data unless we really have to. So it might come in handy later. I'm just going to keep it in my mind that there is an extra building here, and I will make sure to come back to it before we submit all of our edits. So we've done 5 to 10 edits now, so I want to make sure to upload before I forget. So this is uploading back up to the OSM. So I'm going to go to the top left, this green upload button. You look at my mouse, I'm going to click it, and this pop-up window comes up. And it asks for a brief comment. This is the same as you've done when you're mapping. So I'm going to write a brief comment of, you know, fixed overlapping buildings. I'm going to change my data source as Bing, make sure I have that, and see here I'm uploading 60 objects, and press upload changes. And on the bottom left, you can see my upload was successful, so I can continue on validating. All right, as you can see, we need to run the validation tool again. All right, we have 3 more warnings. Our next warnings are unnamed ways. If you remember from previous trainings, we've mentioned these before. I don't personally have any local knowledge of how to fix unnamed ways, or how to, or what the name of these roads are. So I can't fix that error, and that's completely fine. This is just an error that's gonna have to stay there forever, which is fine. So I can ignore that warning for now. And there's 3 ways that are unnamed. So this is the first one. I'm just gonna make sure that there are 3 roads. So zoom to problem. Yep, that's the first one. As you can see, it highlights the second one. Has the second one over here, and it highlights the third one over here. So it looks like something's going on here. So if I click, you can see there's one road highlighted in red here, and there's another highlighted in red down here. However, they look like the same road. So I'm glad I caught that. I'm gonna zoom in. I'm gonna click that one road, shift, click the other. I'm gonna go up to tools, and I am going to press combine way. So I clicked combine way. You can also use your C key. And now if I click, this is all going to be one road. And I did that just because they were one road. They didn't split in any way. And you can see now there are only 2 unnamed ways, as there are only 2 different highways going through this square. So that's great. We're gonna close out those warnings because we know we can't fix those. We can ignore that for now. Now we're gonna go to these 5 other errors. So one of these is buildings with an almost square angle. So I'm gonna right click it, zoom to problem. Okay, we have a couple here that we can see in our field of view. So I'm gonna click it, press my Q key, and make sure to click and drag and make sure all the imagery aligns. Looks like these imagery aligns. Press the Q key. And one thing that's important to know is you want to make sure you get as close to the actual imagery as possible. And yeah. Something that I wanted to make sure all of these are aligned in the same, all of these 3 should be aligned because it looks like they're pretty aligned. So I'm going to click 2 of these buildings, and then I'm going to click 2 reference nodes. I'm shifting and then I'm clicking, and I'm going to click these 2 reference nodes. I'm going to press Q, and they should align to each other. So if you saw that subtle shift in this one on the left, and now they are all aligned and in the same order. So I can do the same things at the bottom if I want to. And they're aligned and squared. And now if I revalidate, you can see those blue circles, which show that there was not a square angle, went away. Now we can go to the next one. All right, we've got this one right here. This looks like it belongs to this building right here. My arrow is pointing, but it doesn't seem like there's these many nodes. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a replace geometry. If you remember from previous trainings, what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a building. So if I go over to the left here, click that building, that draw building tool, go back down, trace that building, go back up to the left to click my select tool, and I'm going to select both of these buildings. I'm going to click one, press shift, click the other, and then I'm going to click command, or I'm on a Mac, so I press command. If you're on a laptop or Windows, you're going to press control, shift, and then the G key, and that replaces the geometry. What that does is it keeps the history from other users and puts it onto this new shape that I've made. And you can see the tags building equals yes have transferred over from that previous building and moved on to this one. And that's important because we want to make sure that we, as I said before, we don't want to delete any data unless we absolutely have to, because we want to keep the data that other users have made as much as possible. So you can see we have this extra building here as well. And this is just me going through visually scanning, making sure that I have everything aligned. And yeah, my building should be aligned. And as you can see right here, this is another useful part of the Missing Maps validation plugin. So these two buildings share a node, and that's not something that they should do. Sometimes it doesn't show up in your validation results. So that's why I really like this validation tool or this plugin, because it shows you exactly where they're sharing a node, and it highlights it in this orange triangle. So I'm going to click one of these and I can press the G key, or I can also click on this node and I can press the G key, and you can see that triangle went away. And I can click and drag this to where it needs to be. And I can square this building because it's obviously not squared, and to click and drag it and adjust it to where it needs to be. All right. I'm going to run that validation tool once more. We only have one more warning. I'm going to zoom to that problem. All right, it's up here. And you see I pressed that Q key and it made this line. So I'm going to undo my move and instead just shift it down a little bit, press that Q key once more. And once again, we have this extra building, which is completely all right. I just need to keep that in mind before we upload any more. I'm going to run that validation tool one more time. And the only warnings we have now are that unnamed ways. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do that one more visual scan. Well, first I'm actually going to upload my edits just to make sure I have them all saved. And it gives me a warning. There's an unnamed way. This I know. So I'm just going to continue to upload. And I'm going to write my comment. Squared buildings. And I also combined a way. Change my data source to Bing and upload my changes. Next, I want to point out, if you've been looking on the bottom right, there's this plugin called Mark Scene Viewer. If you've been to our other trainings before, we've mentioned it. Basically, it gives you this box of where your field of view is, and you can see exactly where you have looked before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to zoom into this top right. I'm going to clear my Mark Scene Viewer. As you can see right here on the bottom right, there's this pink box and it has like a little eraser and it says clear record of seen areas. I can see there's no pink highlight. And what this does is I can go through and visually scan all of the buildings and all of the data in the area and make sure it's correct, make sure it's aligned to everything. And this really helps me because I want to make sure that I don't miss anything. So I'm going to do that visual scan. It's like these two should be aligned to each other. I did that same thing if I clicked one, clicked the other, and clicked two reference nodes, and I pressed Q, and it aligned one to the other. I'm gonna go up to this top. And you can see as I move my cursor down at the bottom, there's this pink highlight of I've looked at this area before. All right, this all looks correct. Still looking good, just doing that visual scan. It's a little off here. So I'm gonna do an offset. Continue to do that visual scan. And this seems to be a little off, so I'm gonna adjust that imagery. What I'm doing right now is just adjusting that imagery. Same thing here, just doing that visual scan. Adjusting any imagery that I need to see. Going through once more. Everything looks good so far. And we managed back to the top. And you can see there's a portion I missed in the middle here. I wouldn't have known that unless I had looked at that mark scene viewer at the bottom left. You can see there's a hole in the middle where I haven't looked. I'm gonna go down through it. Make sure I view everything. And now you can see my entire square is highlighted that pink color on the bottom right, which means everything, I've looked at everything. Everything looks good to me. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do my final upload. I'm gonna squared buildings and validated square. Change my data source to Bing and upload my changes. I'm gonna run that validation tool one last time before I decide that I'm done. And yep, I only have 2 warnings, which is 2 unnamed ways, which is what we knew. And then I'm done. So I'm gonna do is I'm gonna close out of JOSM. Brings me back to this. The mapping buildings, as you can see right here, we have my locked square, the task that I locked. It's going to ask me, is this task mapped well? I press yes. And you always want to make sure that you have a comment. And you always want to make sure you tag the people who have mapped in this area. So I'm going to press shift. I'm going to press my @ key. And I'm going to @ both of the users in this area. And if you remember, we showed you a list of those validation messages that you can use. We have this Google Doc here that's really helpful, YouthMappers validation messages. So the only thing that we really found that was a little incorrect was there was a lot of unsquared buildings. So I'm going to make sure to mention the squared buildings. So you can see small corrections to make square buildings. So I'm going to copy and paste one of these. Thank you for mapping. At username, make sure to always square your buildings using the Q key. So I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to go back and paste it right here. It says make sure to always square your buildings using the Q key. Great work. And I'm going to add thank you for mapping. And awesome, that's all I need to do. I can press submit task. And now you can see it's changed my validation square here from this blue ready for validation to green finished. Now I'm going to open it up for any questions. All right, if there's no questions, I'm going to do one more demo of this. So I have picked one more, a different task here. So this one, the instructions are in Spanish, but it says just about the same thing. Where it says right here to make sure you adjust your imagery if it's off. And there's some general warnings about creating buildings and mapping roads and how you should tag those roads, similar to what we just saw. So I'm going to click this square here, make sure I have OSM running. Or make sure I have JOSM running. So I'm reopening JOSM right here. Gonna load. I'm going to click that task that I want to validate. Press validate selected task. All right, it's going to show me that I have that square locked. I'm going to go to my JOSM. And if I looked here, if I go back to Chrome, it asks me to use Bing aerial imagery. And it preloaded that for me, which is really nice. So I already have that all set. So I don't need to add any imagery because, as you can see, if you look on the top right here, it says one of my layers is Bing aerial imagery. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a visual scan, see if I need to adjust any imagery. Doesn't seem like I need to. Everything seems to be aligned really well. So I'm going to run that validation tool. And you can see we have 9 warnings on the right and 20 other warnings. So I'm going to click that drop-down bar and go to that first warning, which is crossing building and highway. Right-click it, zoom to problem. You can see it's highlighted it in yellow over here, middle of my screen. So it seems like there's this node in the middle of this building. It's crossing over. I'm going to click it, and I'm going to drag it right back where it needs to be. Make sure it's aligned to that highway that's right there. It's a little fuzzy, but I can still make it out. So now it's not in the middle of a building. Roads don't run into the middle of buildings. So I'm gonna just make sure that's correct, run that validation tool, and that warning went away. The next 8 warnings are all unnamed ways. Like I said before, this is not something that I can fix because I don't have any local knowledge. Therefore, I'm going to ignore all of these, instead close it out, and go to my next warnings, which I have 20 buildings with an almost square angle. So I'm going to take a look at these, and you can see down here, that there's a lot of these smaller buildings, all of which have 4 nodes, and they're all unsquared. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I have just this area where my mouse is hovering around. I'm going to have that in my field of view, and I'm going to go and use the search tool. So up at the top, right where my mouse is, there's this magnifying glass. I'm going to click it. You can also click Control, Shift, and F to bring up the search tool. And once I do that, I'm going to write in building, in view, nodes, :4 dash. And what this does, if it highlights all of the buildings that are in my field of view at this current time that have 4 nodes. And I'm going to press search, or 4 nodes or more, I should say. So it's selected all of these buildings. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press my Q key. And it's going to square all of those buildings for me. I'm going to run that validation tool again. And as you can see, on the right, instead of building with an almost square angle, we used to have 20 of those. Now we only have 5, and all of the ones in our field of view are squared. And I'm just going to do a little visual scan and make sure that they're all aligned. I turn them all. This doesn't seem to correspond with any building. I'm going to move it over and make sure that I adjust it. Use it for this other building that wasn't mapped here. Same with this one. Gonna use it for this building down here. And these seem to all be good. And adjust that over. And if you see, like, this is the missing maps validation tool, where I can click it, and if I drag this building over another one, it immediately pops up overlapping buildings, which again, me as a visual learner, is really great for me. Adjust that over, and it seems like this area is good. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Next, we're gonna go to our next error. Same problem. Seems like there's this hanging building. Doesn't seem to quite fit anywhere. And it has an unsquared angle. I'm just gonna leave that for now. Seems like we have another one. I'm gonna leave these 2 for now, just in case we need it if we have extra buildings as I come across it. I go to my next one. Same thing with this one. Seems like there is a few buildings where there's some extra mapping happening. I'm gonna go to my next one. All right. We have this building. I'm gonna do the same thing as I did before because it seems like there's a lot of nodes for a building that has 4 corners. So I'm gonna go to the left bar, press draw building. I can also just press my B key. I prefer to physically move my mouse and press the building tool. Personal preference. I'm gonna draw up that building. Press my select tool. Select both of the buildings that the old building and the new building I created. Press Command, Shift, and G, and it replaces the old one with the new one, perfectly mapped. All right. Let's check, do my validation. I'm actually going to delete this one. These buildings for now. It doesn't seem like I could find an extra building where they could go. Validate once more. Go to my problem. Delete that building. All right, these 2 buildings right here. Going to click them, press my Q key, adjust that imagery. And it seems like everything else is good. Seems like I got 10 warnings. So we got this crossing, building, and highway. I click it, it's named a problem. So it seems like when I squared all of those buildings before, this was in view. As you can see, this is a little bit of a wonky building. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to retrace this building. And one way to do this is I'm going to draw 2 different buildings because it seems like there's 2 different squares here. So they will be overlapping, which is completely fine for now. just tracing those two parts of that building. And I'm going to click them, and I'm going to press Shift and my J key, which is going to join those two buildings together. And as you can see, if I validate, it gives me this circle here, which means that this is not a right angle, which is fine. But I don't want to click the building and press Q. I'll show you what happens. I'm going to click that building, press Q. As you can see, it creates this angle that's not exactly what is in the imagery. I'm going to undo that. And instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to manually click each of the nodes. And when you click the nodes in this manner, order does matter. So I want to make sure I go either clockwise or counterclockwise. I'm going clockwise here. I'm going to click that node, press Shift, click all of the other nodes that I want to align it with. I'm going to press Q. Next, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go counterclockwise this time. And validate that. Cool. Now you can see once I validated again, that little circle went away, which means that it's no longer an unsquared building. So I'm gonna click and replace geometry again. That's gonna be Control, Shift, and the G key, and it's gonna replace the old building with the new one. I'm gonna validate. We have 8 warnings, and those are the 8 unnamed ways that I mentioned before. So once again, I'm going to do that visual scan with the bark scene viewer down at the bottom right here. I'm going to go to my top right corner. I always like to start in the top right and just go around my screen. So I'm going to clear. Another way that you can do this is, I believe you can go up to View. At the top left, there's this View, and then I can press Mark Scene. And instead of Record Scene Areas, I can press Clear. And you can see down at the bottom right, it's cleared my field of view. So now I have that clear square, and I can track where I've seen thus far. So I'm going to do a little bit of a visual scan. Just scanning with my eyes for any errors, any extra buildings, any imagery that isn't aligned. Not seeing anything so far. We have an extra building right here. I'm gonna just delete that.
There's one building, just up. There's one building's not mapped.
Oh my God.
Go just it's off the screen right now. Go up, move up where you just were. Right on the edge. There you go.
Oh, I see right here. Thank you for that.
Yep, no worries. Second set of eyes always helps.
Yes, that's true. Second set of eyes does help. So I'm going to just move that and draw that building. And that's perfect. That means I don't have to delete that imagery. Do that next visual scan. Making sure I check everything. Looking good so far. And yeah, it's looking good. I'm gonna look at my mark scene viewer, seeing everything, zooming out a little bit. And everything looks good to me. Oh, well, actually, not so far. I have this highway here, and it seems like it's not connected. This seems like the same road. To me, it's connected by the same node. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click them both. I'm gonna go up to tools, combine way. I can also just click this with my C key. I just want to show you guys where this tool is. It says, give me an error message. The ways cannot be combined due to their current direction. You want to reverse some of them. So I'm going to press yes, which is reverse and combine way. We're about to combine two objects where the following tags are conflicting. One of them has a tag which is surface equals unpaved, and one of them has a tag with a name. I'm okay with that. That means that that second highway that I clicked is going to get that name and the surface type. I'm going to press yes. As you can see, that name that was there shifted from over here to here, and now it's all one road. So now that I know that happened, I'm going to just check all of the other roads. All right, these two seem like they need to be combined. I'm going to click my C key, reverse and combine. Maybe I should. This seems like another highway that connects to this highway. Just gonna combine those. Gonna create a node right here. Gonna click, shift, click, and then press my M key, which is merge. And one thing to note about the merge tool, something I did wrong here, is order of selection matters. So when you click that first node, and then you click that second node, the first node is going to adjust to the second node. Click that M key, and as you can see, that first node moved over instead of that second node moving over. Looks about right. I'm going to do the same thing here. Click node right here. It's the M key, and that highway aligned. All right, buildings look good to me. The roads look good to me. The waterway looks all right. I think I'm ready to upload. I'm gonna upload right here. It gave me that warning of there's some unnamed ways. This we know. We have some unnamed ways. I don't know them. I'm gonna continue my upload. I'm going to write in my change set comments of squared building, replaced geometry, and combined ways. It's going to take my data source, which was Bing, and I'm going to upload my changes. Great. And now I'm going to close out JOSM. I'm going to go here to the completion tag. It's going to ask me, is this task mapped well? Once again, I'm going to say yes. Add a comment. I'm going to add the users who mapped this area. Seems like there's just one this time. Once again, I'm going to look at these validation messages. And I'll show you the different ones that they give you. Some of them are for squared buildings, mark as complete, tag features, mapping non-buildings as buildings. So yeah, there's a lot of great validation messages. This document is available on the YouthMappers website, so I would suggest that once you guys are validating, you should go through this document. It gives you a great idea of what to use for those validation messages. So I'm going to do the same squared buildings because we did have quite a few squared buildings. I'm going to copy and paste this right in here. I'm going to say hi, and I'm going to do I'm going to add the user. It says, thank you for mapping. Just a reminder to use to make sure you square your buildings using either the Q key after you tag it or by right-clicking on the building and clicking the square button. This will ensure all of our buildings are uniform and more accurate. I'm just going to have a cute little keep up the good work. And then I'm going to press submit task. And it's updated my task to finish. And yeah, those are my 2 demos for today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Does anyone have any questions?
If you have a question at this time, you want to take yourself off mute, by all means, please do so. Or if you feel more comfortable, put it in the chat. We're here to answer questions as well. Awesome. Great job, Naza. Great job, Flora. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. As a reminder, all of the slides that you just saw and the recording of this training will be sent out to everybody that registered for this particular training today. And hopefully we'll have that to you in the next week. And we'll be able to use that as a reference anytime you need it. So with that, if there are no questions, we will close things out. And again, once again, thank you very much for coming today and participating. We really appreciate you showing up. And happy mapping. Hope you guys get to participate in a mapping event in our training or something over this next week while we celebrate OSM Geo Week. All right, take care, everybody, and hope to see you again soon. Happy mapping. Thanks, guys. Again, Flora, Naza, thank you very much. Kayla, SB, thank you guys very much. We'll see you guys very soon. Have yourself a great weekend.
Bye. Thank you, guys.